to you from Beer to Whiskey Studios, high atop Barley's Taproom on Washington Street in downtown Greenville, South Carolina. I'm Russ Heaps, and welcome to this episode of Beer to Whiskey. This is one of our Big Jon and 5 segments where we get my buddy on the other end there, Big Jon Richards, who is pretty well known in the upstate as knowing a lot about beer. John, this is where you're supposed to say "aw shucks."
Shucks.
Shucks. And we get John usually to pick a beer and we talk about it. But this week we got a little different twist on it this episode because we've got Josh Beeby here, who is the owner and proprietor of Barley's Taproom, and he sort of picked this beer, and so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Barley's. We're going to talk about Josh. It may run a little longer than 5. I'm just warning you. So, guys, what are we drinking here?
Josh?
Yeah, so we have nice aged Avery The Kaiser. So we're about a 9.5% Oktoberfest style beer. Honestly, one of my favorite beers out there. Big Jon and I were talking earlier, but that it's honestly
Mutual love.
In the top 10 list for Big Jon here. So, and it's definitely up.
Right.
Was one of my favorite beers. So, what we've done with this one, we started here at Barley's about 8 years ago now. We started a cellaring program. We have a cellar back there behind the bar. It's all hidden and nice, where we age big beers that are able to be aged. So nothing super hoppy back there, but this is one of the productions, and we pulled this guy out this year, so it's 3 years old. Haven't had it yet.
Oh, so this has been sitting back there.
It's been back there for 3 years, yeah. Wow. And we pulled this guy out for Beer Fest this year, which was last month. Biggest little beer fest is the production we do here, and a lot of that beer comes out of there. So yeah, so cheers to you guys. I can't wait to taste it. Yeah. I didn't get any at the festival. I was a bit busy this year. So.
Wow, that's nice. See, that's
rich.
Yeah.
This is why this right here, the fact that this has been sitting back there for 3 years, is one of the reasons why Big Jon and I and a lot of other people refer to Barley's as beer headquarters in Greenville. And I'm not blowing sunshine up your skirt, Josh. But you don't find this.
Yeah, okay.
You don't find this in a lot of places. A lot of places, number one, don't have the facilities to hold 2 or 3 kegs of beer for years. And most don't have most don't have the money to do it. So when they buy it, they got to sell it.
Oh, that's true. Russ hasn't been back to yet, has he? No, okay.
No, I haven't peeked behind the curtain. I've been up and down the back stairs a few times doing this, but that's as big a peek as I've had behind the curtain.
That's funny.
So what are we dealing with here beer-wise?
So it's an Imperial Oktoberfest, which isn't a real style, but it is. I mean, it is because it exists. And they've taken the idea of an Oktoberfest, which is a amber lager, and then with imperializing anything, you're essentially taking a recipe and doubling all the ingredients except for the water.
Souping it up. Yep.
So it's gonna be a bigger, more aggressive version of whatever that thing is. So you just got a lot of toffee and a lot of caramel, not amber. That's the color.
Yeah, that's the color.
And then with the Imperial Oktoberfest, they've tossed some hops in there too. Pearl hops, German noble, one of the noble style hops. It's not a real noble hop, but it's Pearl's got a pretty high alpha acid content, so you get a little of that bitterness in there that'll help balance down the bigger sweetness, the bigger the beer goes.
And this is actually a great beer to be an imperial style beer because Martins typically are very malty beers, and obviously the malt is where the sugar lives, and that's where the yeast is getting to. So doesn't change. When they first came out with double IPAs and Imperial IPAs all these years ago, probably 12 years ago now, a lot of them were just too sweet.
Sure.
And then a few breweries figured out how to do them right, where they're super hoppy and big alcohol. But this one, you can hide the sweetness in there because that's kind of the style of the beer in the first place. So.
I do get the toffee and caramel out of it, which I think is
And still a little lasting alcohol in there too. A little bit of bite there too. It's good.
Yeah.
So
Very nice.
So Josh, in talking to you, I get the impression you're not from around these parts originally.
No. I'm from the deep south. Yeah, I grew up in Sydney, Australia. Moved here when I was, I don't know, around 20. Started traveling back and forth a lot. I was a professional snowboarder back then, so spent a lot of time over here in the off-season training and stuff, and then our winters are opposites, and I'd go home and snowboard and compete and keep my sponsors happy, and then we'd come over here. And eventually I just moved over here altogether full-time, and then met my wife, and the rest was history. So, yeah.
How did you get involved with Barley's? Where did that start?
Well, so, you know, traveling the world snowboarding, you know, even though we were professional snowboarders, we didn't make any money doing it really. We got a lot of product that we sold.
Right. I'm an automotive journalist, I understand.
Yeah, exactly. So back then, obviously, you know, we had to survive.
Right.
And so we would spend a lot of time, since we were snowboarding all day. This is when the sport first began, so we weren't even welcome on most ski resort mountains. So we were really pioneering the sport, and in order to survive, we worked in a lot of kitchens. So I've always loved cooking since I was a little kid, and that's always been a passion, and I've always kind of wanted to open a restaurant. But I went to college, got my business degree, and I was like, oh, now I'm going to go and do advertising like my dad did. And that I sat through 2 interviews, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But I'd been cooking at another local restaurant downtown for a couple of years. And then my wife actually came and waited tables at Barley's, and they had been open for a few years. And then I came up here. There was an opportunity as a manager to come in and be the bar manager here, so I did that. Came in as bar manager, really ticked off a bunch of people with some of the things that we changed. Took some beers away, like Rolling Rock, that just didn't make sense to be in Barley's. Yeah. I was like, yeah, that's gone. And oh boy. I was not the most loved person around. But about a year later, I got promoted to the general manager, and about 6 months after that, the owners came to me and said, we're selling the business, we're out. So I was like, that's interesting. So it was kind of a weird place to be. I've been running this restaurant for almost 2 years, and then for that to happen. So I talked to my wife, and we decided to try and buy it. And they were very gracious and helped us, the old owners, get control of it, and we bought it in 2003. December 1st, we took over in 2003. At the time, Barley's had been open 8 years, I think. We opened in 96. You do the math?
Yep, that sounds right.
Yeah, right about there. And yeah, the rest is history. We put our heads down and really started working on it and making this place the best place it could be. So I think the cool thing about Barley's at the time, we were the only craft beer place in town, and I can't take credit for that. We got to give a lot of credit to Doug and Jimmy, who were the guys who owned it and started it and sold it to me. But once we took over, we saw that we were very much limited because we had a 6% alcohol level cap. So we set out to try and get that changed. And then also in the process of that, we did a lot of traveling and discovered all these wonderful breweries that we couldn't get. So we started reaching out to breweries and saying, we want you here. And they said, well, we don't want to come because we can't sell any of our beer. We can only sell 1 or 2 instead of, the whole portfolio. So we soon realized that getting that law change was the most important thing. So we set about that. I worked very closely with the Fawcett brothers at the time it was Piedmont Beverage, now RNDC. And they have a brother who's a lawyer down in Columbia that lobbies for them permanently. And it was quite ironic because we had a group called Pop the Cap, which was a lot of local breweries and people who were interested in beer. And they were actually up here having a party and trying to figure out how we get this thing to the bill. And meanwhile, I was downstairs with the Fawcett brothers, and Don Richardson was there because he was, at the time, he was importing a lot of the higher alcohol Belgian beers. So we had a little meeting of the minds downstairs, and we got it pulled in about a week in the end. It was really amazing how that happened.
Wow.
And then the floodgates just opened, and from that point, we went to work, and we reached out to every brewery we possibly could figure out that we wanted here. And that's where the influx came. That was a good year.
How many taps do you have here?
Currently right here, just in Barley's, we have 72.
Okay.
Not including the tasting room taps, which we've got 6 back there, but they don't get used to the public. So, but 72.
I didn't know you had a tasting room.
Yep, that's the cellar.
Okay.
This is the behind-the-scenes stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
that's where I keep my 2 or 3 beers for 3 years. That's where we lay the beer down.
But is that something that for like private functions or how does that get utilized?
So we started this this aging program, like I said, about 8 years ago. I talked to my general manager, Drew, and he's in charge of all the beer purchases now and stuff. And does a great job with that. And I said, we want to start aging some of this stuff. So we had a little office back there that was very small. It was just used for storage.
Right.
And we started collecting bottles and just putting them back there. It was right behind. We have a walk-in cooler here, and it's on the other side of that. So that room stayed temperature-wise pretty cool in there and pretty consistent. So we started just putting beers back there. We didn't inventory them. We didn't have any. We just had boxes upon boxes. Yeah. And then it got to a point where I went to go open the door one day and I couldn't get in because there were beers piled high.
That's a terrible thing.
It was bad. And I was like, okay, we got too much going on. So then we were writing a reserve menu one day, and Drew was like, hey, we need to get this beer. And I'm like, it's down the bottom of all that. And so we dug it out, and it was labeled what it was in. We got finally, after digging that box out, we pull it out, and it was full of beer that wasn't what was labeled on the box. It was a bunch of other stuff. I'm like, oh no. So it became a cluster. And when you're doing a program of that scale, it can get pretty messy pretty quick. So
sure. We
soon realized that A, it was disorganized, and B, we were racking up some serious money back there. So we really needed to look after it. So we kind of took the wall out and rebuilt it and created an actual functional cellar back there. And it's quite beautiful, I think. I'm proud of it. And we're now organized, and we have full temperature control in there. And we put a big conference table in there, and we have done some tastings. We've done different events in there. So we do a fair bit back there.
How do you make the decisions on what you're going to buy? Is it just whatever comes along, or do you have, okay, we need 8 stouts and we need 6 pilsners and we need, how does that happen?
That's a good question. So we had general rule of thumb from day one that it's got to pass my lips first.
Okay.
I got to like the beer. I got to be proud of what I'm putting on the wall.
Sure.
And then at that point it goes to the customer, and if they like it and they're drinking it, I'm not going to put a beer on. If a beer sits there for 2 or 3 months and before we blow it, it's probably not coming back on.
Yeah.
And one of the things we did early on that I think was our best advantage that other places didn't do is we work directly with breweries whenever we can. So we travel a lot. Drew and I will go to Craft Brewers Conference, and we work really closely with all that breweries. So we have the 3-tier system in South Carolina where you've got to go through your distributor, but then the distributor has too much control. So we learned early on that if you go to the brewery and we have a relationship with them, they've got more power to tell the distributor this beer is going to Barley's, nowhere else, sort of thing. So we work with the breweries, and there's a give and a take sometimes. Sometimes they'll have beer that we don't really care for that much, but we'll help move it if need be.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we built a reputation, and that enables us to get a lot of really cool stuff that a lot of other places don't have the opportunity to get sometimes maybe. We want to sell good beer. Mm-hmm. And that starts with, just research, knowledge, tasting,
sure.
All that sort of stuff. And typically, you find your breweries that have a good consistency across the board. Then it's a little easier to say, okay, I've never had this beer from them, but they haven't done anything bad yet, so we'll go for it.
Right.
Which makes it a lot easier. And then we have really good relationship with our distributors as well, so that definitely helps. But yeah, it's a tough game, but you got to be on top of it. And it's gotten harder nowadays because there are so many breweries out
Right.
there, you know.
Well, and there's more. I know I've been in Greenville for 10 years.
Yeah.
And in the 10 years that I've been here, suddenly there are more places, number one, that are carrying a few craft beers at least.
Yep.
I mean, Trio, the Italian restaurant,
Yeah.
has 4 or 5 craft breweries on tap, for crying out loud. But it's, in terms of just tap rooms and availability of craft beer for
amazing.
consumers, it's gotten a lot tougher.
If you go, I want to say it's like a 5-block radius, there was something like 10 designated tap rooms.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is baffling.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest difference, say, between Greenville and somewhere like Asheville. We didn't have the local breweries, so we couldn't, that bumper sticker didn't work around here.
Yeah.
So my vision at that time was, well, I want to be the best beer bar in the country, so if the country is my playing field, then my local brewery is the Southeast. So at the time I was selling a lot of Highland, Terrapin, and all that, whereas the rest of our taps were, you know, Stone, Bell's, Founders, all these great beers and great breweries from all around the country. And as it's kind of grown and there's more local breweries in there, we still support the guys who got us to where we're at.
Sure.
And again, I think we cop a lot of flack sometimes probably on the market because we're not super heavy on locals, but we do support our local breweries definitely, but the rules don't change.
Yeah.
It's still got to be really good liquid in order to come in
And it's
here.
got to sell.
It's got to sell.
Right.
So, but it's crazy. I mean, we're now, going back to what you were saying, not only has it blown up as far as tap rooms, we now have 4 local breweries, and I want to say at my last count, I know of 8 that are opening this year.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I can think of 8 that are opening this
wow.
year. I'm really excited to finally have a good gamut of local breweries. So it'll be good.
I want to say, Josh, I really appreciate the fact that you guys host us and let us do this up here, and we appreciate it.
You brought up earlier, really briefly, and talking about being the best beer bar in the country, you have this little festival.
Yeah.
We're drinking one of the beers from that I think is one of the best festivals I've ever been to, and I've been to festivals all around the country. I mean, there's not I don't know that I've ever been to a festival that's as represented by the breweries as good as your festival is here.
Well, thank you.
And there's some really fantastic beers here, some great people, and just a good festive environment.
Yeah, so biggest little beer fest, we just did it, what, about a month ago, I guess?
Yeah.
Maybe not even that. Yeah.
It's a January.
Imagine that, I can't remember. It is a January thing, and there's a lot of thought that went into that as well. So there was a bit of a lack of beer festivals, and there were a lot of people coming into town, putting on festivals at the Barlow Center that were just money-making programs, and just would put any beer on.
Was par.
Yeah, at best. And, you know, having worked so hard in this town to get beer to where it is, it was just very disappointing for me to sit back and watch that sort of stuff happen. So when we first started going to beer festivals back in the day, they were small, they were intimate, they had awesome, cool beers from the breweries, and they all had a brewery rep or a brewery employee that was there. I sat back and I said, well, how do we put on something that's what a beer festival used to be for me?
Yeah.
And the first thing came to mind was we need to have representation. So I went to my brewery reps and said, what is the best time of year where you don't have festivals? So obviously spring and fall are just packed with festivals, and they're every weekend going, and they just get burnt out. So I'm like, winter. Okay, cool. No one's going to be, in the middle of winter, no one's doing a beer fest. So,
and you're indoors anyway. So.
Yeah, and that led to the next thing. Where do we do this where we can't be outside in a park somewhere? And I thought, well, hey, if we keep it here, that opens up a world of opportunities, because we have all the taps to pour from if we wanted to do it that way, which is how we did it the first year, which was a mess. You learn from these mistakes. We're not having to pull off-site permits, off-site insurance. Everything's already paid for in here. We pay for the beer we get to sell the beer like this after it's over with, so we can offset the cost there. And so everything kind of made sense to put it here. Those are the big things. Small festival, small and intimate, really awesome beers, brewery representation, and that was about the criteria.
So we had 250 people capped this year and 260 beers, is that right?
So I thought that's what it was, but I thought 250 was my number, and it probably is about that once we add the volunteers and all the brewery reps.
Yeah.
There's 60 to 80 people that we use as volunteers or reps to help put this party on for about 160 people. So we sell about 160 tickets.
Wow.
I got to tell you, I was expecting to come in here and be shoulder to elbow with people and have trouble getting beers, and that was not the case.
When you go and you get a 2-ounce pour of beer at a beer festival and you got to wait in line 10 minutes,
Right.
It's no fun.
I was really impressed by it, and I was impressed by the compact crowd and the fact that there were actually representatives from several of the breweries, and not just the local ones. I mean, Ballast Point had somebody there.
And it's great. We do the Trapdoors, our other restaurant in the basement here, obviously, and so we do all Belgian down there. And we have basically a representative from all of our importers fly in for this event. So a lot of the local reps just drive up, but we have people who fly in to represent it, and they all come every year and love it. Yeah, we start selling tickets around November. So about 2 or 3 months in advance, they go on sale. They sell out pretty quick, especially the VIP sell out very quickly. We do it on Martin Luther King weekend every year because we do it on the Sunday afternoon. Gives everyone time to recover Monday. They have the day off work. So it's a good way to spend the day. Yeah, it's great. I love it.
Okay, I think we've covered everything we can cover in a 5-minute segment. Josh, it was fun having you here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Russ. I know.
Forever. Big Jon.
Busy man.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.